Welcome to The Explainer. Let's jump right in, because today we're unpacking something that quietly dictates literally almost every single aspect of your daily life, the invisible logic behind political systems. You see, the laws you follow, the taxes you pay, the freedoms you enjoy, they don't just magically appear out of thin air. They're actually the direct result of this massive, hidden clash of ideas.
Think about it. Every single law comes out of a fight between ideas. Right now, someone out there absolutely believes the free market will fix everything. Someone else is totally convinced the state needs to own the factories. And then there's someone else who thinks we shouldn't even have a government at all. So what does this all mean? Well, these aren't just random, disjointed opinions. They are complete, competing ideological operating systems. And once you understand the underlying code of these systems, it's like a superpower. You can predict how someone's going to react to almost anything.
To actually build a vision of a just society, every single ideology has to answer three core questions. Step 1, what is human nature? Like, are we naturally good, selfish, or just a product of our environment? Step 2 looks at the individual versus the state. What should that relationship actually look like? And finally, step 3, how do we distribute resources, wealth, and power? Change your answers to just these 3 steps, and boom, you get an entirely different worldview.
Let's start with liberalism, the individual first.
This is the ideology that quietly acts as the foundational code for so much of the modern world. At its very core, liberalism is the belief that humans are rational, free individuals, and, crucially, that the individual matters more than the crown, the church, or the tribe. It was a wildly radical idea born out of the Enlightenment. Thinkers like John Locke argued that government exists for one reason: to protect natural rights like life, liberty, and property. Not to grant them, but to protect them. The logic is that if people are just left to be free, they can pursue their own goals with minimal interference.
But, operating systems get updates. Classical liberalism gave us things like constitutions, free markets, and elections. But as societies grew and evolved, modern liberalism was released as a major software patch. This updated software kept the original focus on individual rights, but it added a completely new layer: the belief that the state should actively guarantee equal opportunity. So it steps in to provide education, healthcare, and welfare. It wasn't just about protecting rights anymore. It became about actively enabling them.
And that right there creates a massive tension. How much freedom is too much freedom before it starts actually hurting someone else? This is the central bug, or, depending on who you ask, the ultimate feature of the liberal operating system. It's an enduring, everyday debate that continues to split societies right down the middle even today.
Moving on to conservatism, the fragile inheritance.
Right after liberalism really shook up Europe, a massive ideological pushback emerged. The philosopher Edmund Burke perfectly captured the mindset. It's like saying, don't burn down a house just because you don't understand why a wall is load-bearing. Watching the absolute bloody chaos of the French Revolution, Burke warned that revolutions always promise utopia, but usually just deliver bloodshed. So conservatism arose out of a preference for slow, careful reform rather than sweeping, radical overhauls. So, conservatism is really a lens. It views society as a fragile, incredibly complex inheritance built over centuries. From this viewpoint, radical change tends to destroy way more than it fixes. That's exactly why this system values hierarchy, tradition, religion, and family stability. Untested change is just seen as way too risky. And what's super fascinating about this is how adaptable the code is. For example, American conservatism focuses heavily on protecting a constitution and free markets, while conservatism in the Gulf might center more around religious and tribal tradition. Same exact operating system, just running completely different local software. Next up, socialism and communism, the industrial reaction. Now, these operating systems were explicitly coded as a direct reaction to the sheer brutality of 19th century industrial capitalism. We're talking grueling 14-hour shifts and rampant child labor. Karl Marx looked at this and basically concluded the entire system is built on exploitation. The workers don't even own what they create. He saw factory owners getting incredibly wealthy, while the working class, the people literally doing the back-breaking manual labor, owned absolutely nothing. To Marx, that wealth wasn't being generated fairly, it was being extracted. And this sets up a deep, enduring divide. On one side, capitalism prioritizes private ownership, economic growth, and individual incentive. On the flip side, socialism prioritizes collective ownership of the means of production, wealth redistribution, and equality. It's an absolutely massive ideological standoff.
Capitalism promises growth, but its critics point out it produces massive inequality. Socialism promises equality, but critics argue it totally kills individual incentive.
Then we have communism, which takes this a step further. This is the radical aim to abolish private property and class entirely, ultimately creating a stateless society where resources are distributed solely based on need. While democratic socialism might keep elections and just focus on redistributing wealth, communism is the much more radical offshoot. Historically speaking, trying to actually abolish private property required enormously powerful, heavily centralized states to force that transition. And as history clearly shows us, that is exactly where the beautiful theoretical ideal and the gritty real-world reality started to heavily and often violently diverge.
Let's dive into the absolute edges of the spectrum: fascism and anarchism. Born out of the absolute economic collapse, chaos, and deep national humiliation following World War I, fascism relies on three unbreakable core components: nation, leader, loyalty. It views the nation as one single living organic body. Things like class conflict, party politics, or individual rights, those are all viewed as dangerous weaknesses that divide the nation. Instead, it demands absolute, unquestioning loyalty to a single unifying leader and a mythologized national identity. It completely rejects the individual rights that liberalism holds so dear. It's really the extreme response to the fear that democracy is just too weak and too slow to get things done.
Now, let's take a massive swing to the total opposite end of the spectrum: anarchism. This is the belief that hierarchical power inevitably corrupts, and that humans should organize themselves voluntarily through cooperation entirely without a state. If fascism's motto is "the state is everything," anarchism's motto is "the state is the absolute problem." Thinkers like Kropotkin and Bakunin advocated for absolute decentralization. They envisioned small, self-governing communities working together through mutual aid with zero permanent ruling class. But here is the ultimate challenge with that: scaling decentralization for complex systems. While the theory sounds great and focuses heavily on human cooperation, critics impartially point out the sheer logistical nightmare of it all. Like, how do you defend against an invading army, or organize a highly complex modern healthcare system without at least some form of central authority? That specific scaling problem is exactly why it remains the hardest ideology to actually implement at a national level. Which brings us to nationalism, the quiet engine. I call this the quiet engine because it is the underlying code that shakes almost every single other ideology we've discussed today. Nationalism is the belief that a group sharing a language, culture, history, or ethnicity is the primary unit that actually deserves political sovereignty. This specific logic is incredibly powerful. Seriously, it's the exact engine that dismantled massive, centuries-old global empires and built the modern state system we all live in right now. But the absolutely crucial point here is its double-edged nature. Nationalism can be a massive liberating force. It's exactly what drives colonies to fight for their independence, like the creation of Pakistan in 1947. But on the flip side, it can be a highly destructive force. When it gets pushed to the extreme and fused with an aggressive us versus them mentality, it becomes the exact engine that powers fascism. So context and degree completely change how this particular operating system behaves out in the real world. Finally, let's talk about debugging your own beliefs. We've looked all over the world, but how do these operating systems actually apply to you personally? Maybe you strongly believe in free markets, and you also believe in universal healthcare. Or maybe you deeply, deeply value tradition, and you fiercely defend individual freedom. I want to assure you right now, that is completely, totally normal. Almost nobody runs on 100% pure ideological code. Most of our beliefs are a perfectly blended mix sitting somewhere between all these different poles. Being a hybrid, that's just part of being human. Actually, scratch that. The danger isn't mixing your beliefs. The real danger is not knowing why you believe them. It is so incredibly easy to just repeat convenient talking points that we inherited from our families, our local surroundings, or whatever algorithm is feeding our social media feeds. I really want to challenge you to audit your own beliefs, understand the underlying code you are running every single day. Which brings us to a final provocative thought to leave you with. The next time you find yourself debating a policy or arguing about the news, take a step back and ask yourself, which of these operating systems is actually doing the talking right now? Is it liberalism, conservatism, something else entirely? Once you can start decoding that invisible political logic in your daily life, I promise you, you will never look at the news or a political argument the same way again. Thanks for joining me on this explainer, and keep questioning the code.